In today's video, we're going to look at section 6-5, solving open sentences involving absolute value. So in this section, when we talk about absolute value, we need to define it. Absolute value is the distance from zero. We've discussed this before, and you should have talked about this in your past classes. Also, remember, it's the distance from zero, and one of the main things we have to remember, it is never negative. Okay, it is, so essentially it's always positive or zero. Okay, it can be zero. Okay, it can have no distance, but it can never be negative. You can't have a negative distance. It's never negative. So we have to keep that in mind because that can help us in the future, and you'll see here soon. Okay, so let's look at this example. Absolute value, absolute value is the two vertical lines, is equal to 5. So remember, it's the distance from 0. What numbers are at a distance from 0? Well, if we draw our number line, okay, there's two different numbers. We could go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that direction, or to the right, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to the left. So it could be x could be 5, or x could be negative 5. And looking at this will help us transition on how we want to start solving problems. So consider when solving the equations above, that involve absolute value. There are two cases. The expression inside the absolute value symbols could be positive, or the expression inside the absolute values could be negative. So the way we want to look at this, whatever's inside is the positive or the negative of the opposite of the equal sign. So the absolute value of y plus 2 is equal to 4. So we split this when we're going to drop the absolute value. So it could be y plus 2 equals positive 4, okay, or y plus 2 is equal to negative 4. Okay, so it can be either one. So now we just solve like normal. Subtract 2 from both sides. So we get y is equal to 2. Subtract 2 here. We get y is equal to negative 6. So in many of the cases, you should have two answers for absolute value equations. And when you plug either one of those in, you'll end up with 4 in the original equation. Okay, let's look. The absolute value of 3n minus 4 is equal to negative 1. Now, right there, that should tip you off. Remember what we said at the beginning. The absolute value can never be negative. This is saying it's negative, so this can't happen. Absolute value is never negative. And we're done. You can't do it. So that tells us. Okay? So knowing the definition of absolute value helps us, and it can eliminate some work for you. Okay, so the temperature of an enclosure for a pet snake could be about 80 degrees Fahrenheit, give or take 5 degrees. Solve a minus 80 is absolute value of a minus 80 equals 5 to find the max and the min. So we're just going to split them. So absolute value of a minus 80 is equal to 5. So again, it's going to split into two different equations. So we get the inside, a minus 80 is equal to the positive, or a minus 80 is equal to the negative. So negative 5. So again, I just solve. So I don't know why that always happens to me. So I'm going to add 80 on both sides. So I get a is equal to 85, or I can add 80 here. So I get a is equal to 75. So we could have a max of 85, or we could have a minimum of 75. And then we'll say degrees Fahrenheit because it is a word problem. There we go. All right, so now we got to write an open sentence. So this is actually pretty easy. You start with the premise of x minus some number is equal to the distance. So I'm going to say d. Okay, so now the number is always right in the middle of the two given points. Okay, so it's going to be the absolute value of x minus that number, so in this case 6, is equal to, now we're just going to count the units because we want to say 1, 2, 3, so that's how I found the middle, and then that number, that distance, is going to be 3. Okay, so that's how we need to, so that's literally how you do it every time. Okay, and there you go, that's it. That is the open sentence. So another open sentence right here. Okay, so I'm starting with the premise of absolute value of x minus n is equal to d. So we've got our 2 points, so we find the middle. 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay, so my middle number is 3. So I got 3 here and my 2 here. So my open sentence is the absolute value of x minus 3 is equal to 2. And that's all there is to it. Okay, so now, just last thing, we're going to talk about graphing. And we're going to graph it because we don't really know a slick method. Just start with a table. X and Y, or X and F of X. Okay, so I'm going to start with, so always start with what will make the middle 0. It makes it easy. It's a good starting point. Okay, so that's all I'm going to do. I'm going to start with, if I set this equal to 0, I'm going to get 1/2, or negative 1/2. Okay, so if I plug in negative 1/2, I get 0. All right, so that's my first point. So negative 1/2 is 0. So that point's going to be right about there. And then I'm just going to go from left. I'm going to start at negative 1. If I plug in negative 1, I get negative 1. If I plug in 0, I get positive 1. If I plug in 1, I will get 3. If I plug in negative 2, I will get negative 3. So now we just plot our points right there. Then I get 0, 1. And then I get 1, 3. And then I get negative 2, 3. So what's nice is if you graph correctly, you'll end up with what looks like a V. And all absolute values look like a V. Okay? So if you're not getting a V shaped with your absolute value, you made a mistake somewhere and you should double check. So it might be a little bit wider, it might be a little bit taller and skinnier, but you will end up with a V regardless.